right, now we get to some crazy ones. Okay, is there a GCF? Always look for a GCF first. I know I say that a lot. When I first looked at this problem, I thought, of course there's a GCF. It's 2. Okay, sure. We'll play your little game. We'll factor out a 2. Don't do this. Please don't. It's not wrong, but it's not productive. Minus 46? Yeah. And you're going to realize there's another GCF, which means that you didn't get the greatest common factor in the first place. You got a common factor, but not the greatest. So I need the best one, the greatest one. And so the greatest common factor is going to be larger than that. If you get to this point and you're like, oh, well, 2 goes into all those. We already factored out a 2. So factor out another 2, which means, of course, 2 times 2 would give you 4. So here goes. Whoa, let's just fling that thing everywhere. Let's try this again. So here goes. We're going to factor out a 4 this time. So again, if your first thought, just first glance was, oh, factor out a 2. Yeah, think harder. 5x squared minus 23x. Yeah, 23, yeah. Minus 10. There we go. All right, now we are going to factor it, okay? Because we have factored out a GCF, now we're going to factor this quadratic trinomial. Don't forget your 4. It's along for the ride at this point, but it belongs, okay? It belongs, it belongs. I like to look for prime numbers at the first or last position if I can. That don't always happen. They won't on the next problem. But in this case they do, and it's a 5. Okay, so we're going to factor a 5, and your only options are 5 times 1. So instead of like 5 times 1 or 1 times 5, just 5 and 1 or 1 and 5. I really don't care. I'm going to go 5 and 1. So 5x, 1x, that's it, okay? Now we've got to mess with this 10. Let's slide this up a little bit. We've got to mess with this negative 10 and decide how to make this thing work. So negative 10 is negative 1 times 10, or 1 times negative 10, negative 2 times 5, or 2 times negative 5, and we're going to have a lot of options to explore because we can also explore the reverse of all of those, okay? So at this point you might be tempted to say, oh, fantastic. We're going to add and try to get a negative 23. No, you can't do that here because of that 5. All right, again, the 4, he's already played his game. He's not in what we're doing now. It's going to come in handy. So we just start guessing, and I'm going to start guessing, okay? I'm going to guess wrong this time. I guessed correctly on one of the previous ones. Let's go with 1 and 10. I'm going to go with this one, and I'm going to reverse the order. No, I'll keep the order. I'll keep 1 and positive 1 and negative 10, okay? If you multiplied this together, you'd have negative 50x and positive 1x. That's going to give me negative 49x. I want negative 23 instead, so that's not it. So this is not going to work, and this one's not going to work either. It would give me positive 49. If I did, since I just did this one and got negative 49, doing this one in the same order would give me positive 49, and I don't want that. So that does limit our options. Let's try something different. Let's tap incessantly on the board and annoy everyone that's watching this with headphones. I just did 1 and negative 10. Let's do the reverse order of that and stop right there. I said this in a previous video. I hope you noticed this. There's a GCF right here of 5. If you have ever created a GCF, then you would have had that same GCF from the beginning, and you didn't. And you would have had that GCF here in this trinomial, and you don't. So it's not that. We have actually, whether we realize it or not, just ruled out this one and this one in the order they were written, and also in the reverse order because it creates this GCF. So what we're going to do is erase those and start dabbling with the 2's and the 5's. And I am not going to reverse the order of these, and here's why not. Because if I put a 5 here, whoops, if I put a 5 here and a 2 here, whatever the signs are, you've got the GCF going on, all right? So already we've ruled out the reverse of those, okay? So don't do that. Don't do those. We'll do 2 and 5. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and switch colors because this is going to be correct. I'm going to do 2 and 5. Now, am I doing negative 2 and positive 5, or am I doing positive 2 and negative 5? Well, let's, at this point, we can kind of tinker with it. So this is me tinkering with red. 25x, 2x, okay? Well, 25 minus 2 is 23. I want a negative 23, so I want this one to be negative. 25 needs to be negative. So if 5 times 5 is negative 25, then somebody had better be negative. This one's going to be positive. So final answer, positive there, negative there. Let's erase the doodling. Let's erase the others as well. There we go. That's it. That is our answer on that one. Let's do the next one, which is very tricky. It's going to involve a lot of thinking through things. But you know, a little bit of thinking never hurt anybody. Whoop! Can't write with an eraser, no matter how hard you try. 8x squared plus 23x plus 14. Okay, is there a GCF? I say it a lot, but I'll say it again. Yeah, there is, but it's a 1. So if you wanted to, you could factor out a 1, and that would be pointless. So don't do it. You could put 1 and it's not. Okay, so we're not. But we are going to have to factor this, and now things get very, very tricky, because I always like to look for a prime number in the first or last position, and we don't have that here. So my whole tone of voice just lowered like it was the saddest thing ever. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Fortunately for us, though, we don't have to play with any negatives. Everything here is positive. So when we talk about what multiplies to give you 8, we're going to be like positive 1 times positive 8, or positive 2 times positive 4, and we won't talk about negatives. And we'll do the same thing with 14. 1 times 14, 2 times 7. And I am not going to mess with negatives at all. So I'm not able to lock one of these numbers into place and say, oh, it's prime, so those are my only options. There's going to be a lot of experimenting, a lot of trial and error. This is going to take about an hour. Oh no, I'm kidding. I personally, and I always give my opinion on these, I like to avoid, not always the best option, but I like to avoid the ones, like 1 and 8 or 1 and 14, because it's usually not those. Sometimes it is, but this time it's, well, I don't know. But I'm going to go with 2 and 4, just because it's a good first guess, because often it's not the 1 times whatever. So we're going to just experiment with that, and we'll just try whatever could work. Okay, here's what not to do. Don't do 2 and 7. Notice the GCF, so no. We'll do 7 and 2. And that's a no. GCF here as well. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Man, this is beautiful. So that's a no. Now we're going to try 1 and 14, which I can't do. Okay, yes. Okay, so if I do a 1 and 14 here, GCF here of 2. If I do a 14 and a 1 here, GCF of 2. So 1 and 14 is out. Let me rephrase that. 1 and 14 is not necessarily out, but 1 and 14 is out if I do 2 and 4. Okay, so yeah. Which means I have actually exhausted all my possibilities for 2 and 4. So I just tried 1 and 14, 14 and 1. You're invited to my thought process. Yeah, and I just tried 2 and 7, 7 and 2. So we have exhausted everything over here that we could do with a 2 and 4. So it's, well, I didn't mean for that to happen, but it did. 2, 4 is out. 2, 4 is not my option. So we're going to not use 2 and 4. Now we will do 1 and 8. Now you're probably like, well, you told me not to do that first. It's usually not that first, but this time apparently it is. So 1, I'll put it, or not, if you're writing with an eraser. 1 and 8. And now we have options, okay? So 1 and 14, or 14 and 1. Okay, if we do 1 and 14, we've created a GCF here of 2. Don't do it. We can do 14 and 1, and that gives us 14 times 8, which is 84. 84x and 1x is going to give me not 23, okay? So that's out. So we have just exhausted all these possibilities, and we are down to some very reasonable things. Told you it's a lot of guess and check. Isn't there a better way, Mr. Reader? Not if you want to understand the concepts. Okay. First of all, let's not do 7 and 2 because of the GCF situation in these parentheses. But we will do 2 and 7, and this is going to work. Check it out. 7x, 16x, 16 plus 7 is the 23 that I wanted. So let's change everything to positive. We'll make that a 2. We'll make that a 7. We're going to make this an 8x. We're going to make this a 1x. And now everything that looks so confusing is about to go away because we are going to have the final answer in black right there. Okay, x plus 2. Random, it's floating. It's not an exponent, but random x floating plus 2 and then 8x plus 7.